And we're back. And not only are we back, we're back in a brand new year. It's 2026. It is New Year's Day. And what better way to ring in the new year than to create a sketch of New Year's Day by U2, but in an epic orchestral fashion. So that's what we've done. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of unpacking the track. We'll go track by track and take a look at it. We're using all different types of libraries in this. We're using Cinematic Studio Strings, Cinematic Studio Brass, Spitfire, Symphony Orchestra, Damage 2, others as well. Hopefully you enjoy. Let's dig in. So as I do with all my mockups, I started with just a straight piano mockup. Let's take a listen to that. So it doesn't follow the actual U2 release version note for note, but it gets close enough. It covers the verse, it covers the chorus, and that's as far as I went for this little sketch, this little mock-up. And I started with the strings, so let's take a look at where we started after we had the piano mock-up laid out. So I used string shorts. In this case, I used Cinematic Studio strings, and I had it on the staccato articulation. And I really wanted to use the strings as kind of the primary driving force in this particular mock-up, very symphonic sounding. And so I just use an ensemble patch. I've got my highs and mid shorts happening. I've got some lows hitting in specific accent notes, and that's really where the rest of the song builds out from there. The brass follows his accent notes, the percussion follows them as well. So this is what I had for the string shorts. And this is all still verse here. And then we go into chorus right here. And I actually added in a second solo violin there because I wanted to do some real fast shorts in the second part there in the chorus, and so I brought those in, and these are them soloed, and then I'll bring them in with the rest of the strings. Using the measured trim. So you can see just visually looking at the pattern here, I had a bunch of downward runs. And then midway, when I wanted the momentum to pick up, I took the top line and I started running it up and running the middles down, so you get this nice kind of diverging motion there. And when you add that together with the other strings, you get this sort of sound. I was starting to get a little bit of Madagascar soundtrack vibes there. I don't know if anybody else was hearing that. And then from there, I added in the brass to hit on certain accent notes and just bring a little bit of the bottom end. So for the brass shorts, I used Cinematic Studio Brass, and I had those on the staccato as well. So you can hear, again, they're bringing accent. They're not, I didn't want them to be too forward in the mix. I just wanted them to bring some accent in, so you can hear how they hit those certain accents that the strings hit as well. So that's what I did with the short brass, and then I wanted to also add another texture to the strings, and so I brought in some flutes doing a slightly different pattern, but also very very short, very rapid, kind of building off each other. And you can hear those flutes right here. And these flutes are at the moment, my go-to patch: Spitfire, Albion One, Woods Low patch in this case. Woods High, Woods Low, they're great ensemble patches for woods when you just need to bang in a woods part real quick. And that's what this sounds like. So hitting some of those accent notes, and those with the strings sound like this. And then you bring in the brass shorts. So the long strings were Cinemax Studio strings as well, the sustain patch, and we'll talk about a little bit of what I did here as well. So I probably could have spent a little more time making those sound, ultra realistic, but it's a sketch. I wanted to mock it together quickly, and it sits in the mix well. But you'll see, even just visually, the pattern of the strings. They start out relatively clustered, and then as the song moves on and expands, the notes start to diverge up and down the scale from each other and get wider. And I did the same thing with the brass line. So when you couple that with the strings, you get a relatively full sound. The string's long, that is. Riding the mod wheel a little bit here. And this is the verse. Again, everything gets wider, bigger. And then we got to percussion. So the percussion in this was fairly straightforward. Didn't do a ton with percussion, just enough to kind of get that motor going, get the pace up. And for the percussion, I used a couple different libraries. I used Abbey Road, Orchestra, low toms, the epic toms in the low patch. Just a motor underneath, nothing crazy going on, not a lot of variation, just steady as she goes. And then I brought in damage on top of that. So this is just letting the other instruments have their space, do their thing, and then when we get into the chorus, everything kind of really opens up. So that was the percussion. And then the last bit I added in there was the signature bit, really, for the song for U2, at least at the beginning of the song, which is the piano. So the piano I used for this, I used the Claire piano by Native Instruments, but then I did a little bit of treatment to it. I added in a black hole reverb and then a compressor on top of it as well, just to really help it stick out. And in terms of the orchestration of the piano, I wrote the line as it is in the song, and then I doubled it in octaves to help it really stand out. So the piano alone sounds like this. So I let the piano go low in the chorus there because I brought some other instruments in. We'll talk about that in a second. I doubled those instruments on top. I believe a flute is running the top line, and then for the second half of the top line, I actually let the flute go out, and I let a trumpet come in and take that top line to reinforce it. But I want to talk really quickly about the piano, and this is where you take your samples and you do cool things to it with effects. So if I mute out the black hole and the compressor, it's just the Claire piano. It's pretty straightforward. So not a bad sounding piano, but not what I was going for in this, that haunting kind of sound that U2 had with their piano, and the delay and their reverb and everything. And so as soon as you smack black hole reverb on it, you get a wholly different sound. And then just to flatten it out a little bit and bring it up in the mix, I hit it with an 1176 compressor by Universal Audio. That's without. That's with. And so you can hear how putting the compressor after the black hole, it takes all of that reverb, all that echo, and brings that up and compresses it too, which is the effect I wanted. You could put it in front of the black hole and you'll get a very, get a slightly different sound. So let's hear how the first section sounds with all of that in. One thing I forgot, I added a vocal in there in the second half of the first section too that bridges into the chorus, where the vocal really also doubles that melody line that Bono would be singing. Just a choir vocal. For this I used the choir women legato from from Metropolis Arc. I believe it's Arc 1. So just kind of building it in, and this is where it gets that verse, or that chorus. So that takes us into the second part of this, which is where this mock-up really opens up. Let's listen to the second part. So let's take a quick look at that top line. We had the flutes taking some of it. We had the trumpet taking some of it as well. So here's the flutes. And the flutes are in octaves. So that was the main top line, and then I added in a trumpet that takes the second half of that. So in the first part of that, it's playing low and not following exactly, and then the second half, it really becomes prominent and follows it exactly. So it comes up. And then the last thing we had doubling that same line was the chorus, the women's choir, or the women's legato. And then for the low end, I had to go back to my favorite Albion One by Spitfire for that big bada boom. It's the Easter Island patch, one of the deep booms on that patch. So I just let that rumble at the bottom. And then when we're talking about bottom end, also a little trick I used, especially in this particular cue, because it comes from a rock song and there's a bass line. It's got a certain picking pattern. It's dot 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 dot. That's kind of what Adam Clayton was playing, just in terms of his his picking. And so I didn't follow exactly, but I wanted to give that feel. And so, and I need a little more bottom end. And so at the very bottom, I put in a Diva synth, this HS Gammon patch, and I edited it, customized this patch up. And I have this at the very bottom, just running a continuous line in that same kind of picking pattern. So a little bit of homage to Adam Clayton. And when you put that in the mix, you get a nice bottom end that's just kind of hidden down there, that doesn't get in the way, but you feel it. So let's listen to the whole track now all together. And since this was just a sketch, I didn't really do much to master it, but on the stereo out, again, I know best practice is not necessarily to do that. We were starting from scratch, putting together a sketch here, so it's all right. We'll get over it. But I put a Pro EQ on there just to EQ the whole signal, do some basic balancing, and then Gullfoss and an SSL G-Bus compressor. Gullfoss, I find, particularly with cinematic studio strings and the brass as well, it really opens it up if you do a little bit of recover, and you can brighten it a little bit as well. I mean, obviously do this to taste, but I find when I put Gullfoss on the full mix, it really, really opens it up with very little effort. And so all in all, when you put this together with all those plugins, you can hear how open it sounds and prominent. So that's the cue. That's the track. This mock-up was a fun thing to do on New Year's Day. Hopefully everybody had a great New Year's Eve and you're going to have a wonderful 2026. If you're into this kind of thing and these track breakdowns, definitely hit subscribe. More videos will be going up soon, and we will catch you down the road.